Hi, Erin. Welcome to Forward Joy.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
How are you doing today?
Oh, it's been a little bit crazy. My book launched a week ago, so it's been wild, but I'm doing pretty good. I feel like the exhaustion is catching up with me, but it's been great.
Nonstop, I'm
It's been
sure.
nonstop. I know. But I'm having a great time and I'm so happy to be chatting with you.
Okay, so I don't remember if we officially met, but you were at a dinner that I was at in May of 2019. I forgot
Wait, can
who.
I guess the dinner?
Do
Do you
you
know what dinner was?
I can't remember who it was. It was like a random space like on Lafayette or Bowery. Like it was May of 2019. I know that much.
But was it a her dinner with Baba and Marika?
Yes, yes, yes,
See,
yes.
I had a feeling I don't remember, but like I just was like, if it was anywhere, it'd be there. Okay, great.
Yes. And so everyone at the dinner had a little card at their seat with their human design. And I already knew your name when I got the invite to the dinner, so I was really excited about like having my first human design experience. Um, and at that time, I was actually like desperate to leave my full-time job. I was an editor at Harper's Bazaar. I had been there at this point, like just over 8 years. And on my card, I still have a photo of it in my phone, so I dug it out. I'm a generator, obviously. And then you had written, you may feel the most healthy when you can move around, work, and interact with a number of different people throughout the day rather than being stuck with one person or a team. And I was like, this is speaking to me big time on
Wow.
like where I was in that moment. I was like, oh my God,
You have
this
one
is a
office.
sign. This is a sign that I need to leave my job because, like having a job like that it's an incredible experience. It was my dream job, but I was really fed up and I was just having this internal battle about like, okay, do I leave? When do I leave? And like all of 2019, I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave before summer. Okay, I'm gonna leave right after Fashion Week in September. And like, I just kept moving the goalpost for myself.
Mhm.
But yeah, that card just really, really made me feel seen. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh my God, you're welcome. I love hearing that. And did you know that that is not even a part of your chart about being a generator?
Really?
Mm-mm. It's about your
Oh,
definition. I must have like been looking
oh,
at just the full charts and choosing a piece, but it's hilarious
right.
that that was what it was because it's about this part of your chart that like you are somebody who really does not do well when you're like confined to one space or one team or one environment all the time. Like you're
Yeah.
somebody who does well with like freedom and movement. So I love hearing that.
Totally. I feel like that even speaks to how I am in friendships because, of course, like, when you're growing up, you're in like middle school, high school, college, like you have a group of friends, and I had that, but then I always was friends with other people. Like, I could never, I think there's a lot of people who are just like, oh, I'm fine having my little like circle, and they're not really interested in expanding that. But I always like, you know, I'm kind of a social butterfly, but it's like I just like to have lots of different kinds of friends.
Hmm. So funny, totally. And like I can imagine they all pull out different parts of you. So it
Yeah,
can manifest in so many different ways. And what's so interesting about this one is that sometimes people feel like there's something wrong with an environment or like a person because they feel like trapped or confined. And it's like
right.
nothing's like necessarily wrong. Like in a case like that, it felt like you needed a job that allowed more movement, but like
Yeah.
it's more that like you just need to like be stimulated in lots of different ways. And so like it's so true even romantically to partner with people that like really appreciate that need for movement and don't take it personally or interpret it as like something being wrong with them, but more like just a very natural part of who you are.
So true. That's very helpful because I'm currently single. So, um, we'll get into that. But yeah, I feel like that is something that I've been thinking about a lot, just like my need to be moving around. And is that conducive to being, in long-term partnership with someone? But anyway, you have been a leading voice in human design for years. I think you've been at this for like 10 years now.
I know. Yeah.
Um, I would love for you to take us back to your childhood. What were you like as a kid?
Hmm. The thing that comes up, like when I was super young, I mean, I think that I was like just like silly and just loved people. I
Mm.
think that my parents like always thought I would be a therapist when I was growing up because like I was
Ah.
just so I was like, it became like a little bit of a peacemaker in our family. I think sometimes people, become that when it's just like, I want to make sure everyone's okay. It doesn't always come from the best place, but I do think that like I just always loved asking questions. I was so interested in who people were and how they operated and moved through the world. I like remember driving to high school with my sister one day and she was like, "Do you ever get tired of like asking questions?" And I was like, "No, I just like want to know how people work." So I think that was just always my nature. I do feel like when I was growing up it was like a little bit I felt like I saw a lot of people but like I didn't really feel seen in return by many. So I think that that was definitely a lesson that came later in life. I think the other piece that comes up that is relevant is like my parents had, relatively traditional jobs. They were not kind of like in the mystical world at all. This was not a home that I grew up in that had any of that. And yet I was just like always into, yeah, into kind of weird things they weren't. Like I remember in high school kind of hunting out like the one Shambhala center in Seattle and like going to
Mm.
like meditate there. My parents were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I've got to go." And like even like in college, like I found out like who Thich Nhat Hanh was and I like
Mm.
and like was like I was on his like last retreat in the US. I like didn't even and it was just anyway. So I feel like I was just always drawn to things that were so not what was represented in my childhood. And I grew up with parents that were like just so incredibly supportive of that. And I feel like that really gave me so much permission in life to be like, let me just follow what I feel drawn to and see where it takes me.
Of course. Okay, so how did you learn about human design and like what inspired you to actually pursue it as a career?
So I discovered human design in 2015. I was living in New York City and went to a friend's party on the Lower East Side and sat next to a stranger who asked to read my human design chart. And I never heard of human design. Human design was so fringe at the time.
Yeah.
And yet, I was like many, like I was like, tell me everything about myself. I want to know. I was
Yeah.
at a crossroads in my own career. And he proceeded to give me the most insightful, accurate reading I had ever received. I felt like somebody put my like inner world into language and gave me
Right.
words for it where I was like, what? Like, how could this stranger ever know this much about me? And it felt very confronting because I was living opposite every part of my chart. And so like I was just introduced to a way of being that was not what I was living, but did feel so much better. And there was a part of me that really recognized that.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually ended that conversation by saying, Erin, I think you're meant to do this. I think you're meant to teach and share human design. Will you? It was crazy. He's like, will you study with me? So he'd
Oh
been
my
studying for a
God.
decade. I know it was like such a wild moment. And my human design is so much around being invited, feeling recognized, feeling
Mm.
seen, being invited. So my journey into human design began with this pretty wild invitation. I was so blown away by the system and continue to be, but like I don't know if I would have considered like studying it, or making it a career. It was just so far from what I'd been doing.
Right.
But that invitation really unlocked something in him and in me, and that he became my first teacher, and that was how the journey began.
Wait, so are you a projector?
Hmm.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I know about projectors is that they need to be invited. It's so funny. I'm very curious about human design, but I'm only at that point where it's like I know my own stuff as a generator. I haven't necessarily like really studied all the other profiles. Um, but I think it's so eye-opening. Like was always really into astrology and tarot and all of these things. I mean, like very similar to you. It's like I always had wanted to know about people and like what made them tick. So I've always been drawn to these kinds of modalities to understand ourselves and others. And yeah, as I said, like I didn't really learn about human design until 2019 at this dinner, but instantly I could recognize like how useful it is in the way that we look at like the way that we move about the world.
Yeah.
And like yeah, I haven't even learned so much about how it applies to like relationships and friendships and things of that nature. Like I always think of it as like a work thing. But that's why I love that your book, How Do You Choose, which I have right here, really kind of tackles like all those different areas because yeah, I think it is important to know that it's not just about like how we work or like
Mhm.
produce in the world.
Yeah, and I think that, whether it's with kids or partners or colleagues or family members, I think it's so easy to experience friction because we want somebody to be different than what they are, or we kind of expect them to be
Exactly.
similar to us.
Right.
And I think human design is such an amazing tool to just recognize exactly how different somebody is and how we can best support them. Like my biggest dream for this book is like that people not only read the chapters about themselves, but the chapters about their partners and friends and dads and sisters and whoever, and it gives them a little bit more compassion for how different someone else is. So
Hmm.
I think that human design can serve so many purposes, and one of those things is for sure helping us find more flow in our careers. And another one is around really deepening our connections by appreciating very specifically how different we each are.
Hmm. So obviously, as I said, like you've been at this for a while. How did you get to the point where you thought like, okay, I need to write a book, and like, why was now the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I always felt like I would write a book. And I feel like people have been asking me for a long time. But I also didn't want to write a book until like it was super clear on like what book was needed. And
Hmm.
so I think for a long time it was kind of like, oh, like I could write my own version of a human design textbook. There are lots of them. I could add my perspective. But I think like
Hmm.
the books that are out there are really good. Like I just don't know if we need like another human design textbook, you know? And so I just was waiting for the right moment. And I think what became really clear is that what felt like was missing was an exploration of how human design could be practically used in the world. It feels like there's
Hmm.
a lot of like, this is what a generator is, and this is what this is. And like, that's really helpful. And it can only take you so far. Like, I
Right.
think really knowing how to actually use the system in your relationships, in decision making, like, that's how we can actually experience transformation in our lives. So, the
Hmm.
goal of the book was to explore like how can the system actually be used? Not how can I teach you every intricacy of the chart, but how can I teach you like how to actually use this in ways that you will experience transformation and experience change, especially if you're feeling stuck. And also my goal with the book was also to be able to reach people that have never heard of human design. To
Right.
like not have this be a book that's just for my people who love human design and for them like this is the best, like this is
Yeah.
and I think I'm already seeing it where people like have never been into human design and all of a sudden they're like sucked in by the stories and they're like, okay, I want to learn everything. So
Hmm.
I think that like it was really meant to help human design cross the chasm in many ways to kind of reach the mainstream in a way that it hasn't been able to. And,
Yeah.
we'll see if it can do it. And then I think the last piece that I'll share is why I couldn't write it until now is that so much of the book is stories. It's telling the story of human design through people's actual experiences of how they integrated
Hmm.
it in their career and their relationships. And I couldn't have written it before now. Like I
Hmm.
had to sit with 4,000 people in sessions. Like I had to teach human design. Like I had to really like watch and experience human design, not through textbooks, but through people's lives and
Hmm.
see what was the most useful. And so I think that's definitely my favorite part of the book is that it's just told through people's real experiences. And I think that makes it as somebody who's read my own book 1,000 times, it makes it interesting.
Right.
It's like you want to keep reading because people's lives are so interesting.
Of course. And I really like that you speak to the like practicality of it because I think that's really important to me as well. I actually just wrote a newsletter this morning about spirituality and like my connection to it and how it's shaped my life in like the last 10 years. And, there's many different layers to and like definitions of like what it means to be a spiritual person. But for me, it's like I really need it to be practical and like grounded. It needs to be about like staying in the real world and not like trying to escape from it. So I also really appreciate that approach to, all these other modalities and, human design, of course. And I wonder if you feel like this is true because I feel like there's something about human design that people are maybe like less skeptical about it than they
It's
would
true.
be with like astrology. And why is that?
I know. I think that like because I worked with so many companies and I think I worked with people that are for sure skeptical, but like I think I've experienced less skepticism than I imagined.
Yeah.
I have to imagine, I guess two things come up. One is that like human design is so practical. Like, it really like the way that it's communicated, even though it feels esoteric, is very much like this is how you make decisions. Like this is how you're meant to structure your day to day. These are like challenges that you'll could face often. These are strengths that you can draw on. So I feel like it's spoken about or it can be
Hmm.
spoken about in a language that's so down to earth
Yeah.
that I think makes it really relatable even to skeptics. But I would also say
Yeah.
that like It's so specific. My experience in sharing with people that are really skeptical is they kind of reach a point where they're like, I don't want to believe what you're saying because this is totally woo-woo, and yet everything you're saying resonates so much that like
Yeah.
I need to know everything about everyone in my life, you know? And so like I
Yeah.
guess there's a piece where it's like kind of them being like, I don't know how you could ever know this much, and yet it's making sense.
Right. Right.
So like that's what I've seen. And also I will say the way that I present human design, and I lay this out in the introduction for the book, is just very much like what matters most to me is not whether it's true, but whether it's useful. Like, let this spark an interesting conversation about who you are and how you choose. Like, often we move through life on autopilot and don't take the time to step back to think about how do I create opportunities? How do I make decisions? Like, how does my energy move day to day, month to month? And so I think that it's really powerful to just step back and talk about it. Like, I had such an interesting moment in LA recently. I was recording a podcast there, and the woman I was recording with didn't know her birth time. And we had the whole podcast, and I basically had like a real vision for what type I thought she would be. Um,
Hmm.
and she agreed. I didn't ever say it, but she was like, that's the one, that's the one. I was like, that's what I thought. But anyway, she like had this whole moment, and then she like kind of like self-assessed her entire family. And like we basically had this really interesting conversation without ever looking up somebody's design. And like I think looking up your design is obviously so helpful because often we're not living our design. But like it was just so fascinating to me that I was like, people are like getting so much clarity and like so many revelations around their career and relationships. And like we haven't even looked up a chart yet. So like there's
Right.
just something around like it sparks a really interesting conversation and reflection. And so like I think when it's presented through a lens of like use this as a framework, I don't
Hmm.
know, it's really useful.
Yeah. Um, I actually didn't even realize that there's a whole textbook that I assume like once you have someone's birth information, then you reference that. But I guess once you like plug in someone's information and you get that like crazy
Chart.
sort of like diamond chart, I assume at this point it's like you know what everything means just by looking at the numbers and the profile and
Yeah,
the this and the that. You don't have to necessarily reference, like an
that's right.
astrologer doesn't need to reference a book, they just know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like, one of our primary offerings is something called like a blueprint guide, where it's basically kind of a written guide to unique design.
Hmm.
How that came about was that in my early sessions, I like created a custom guide so I could like have a thing that I could keep referencing in sessions to kind of make sure I hit on all the key pieces. So like that's how it all
Hmm.
began, was like needing notes.
Oh,
At this point, and then we started selling them just on their own. But
right,
no, I don't look anything up. But I also think that like
right.
my sessions now are very much in response to what's happening in somebody's life.
Hmm.
So it's more kind of them sharing with me where they are, and then me using their design to kind of help them navigate that challenge.
Right.
So like it is fun, I think that you probably know this. Like I think it's really fun when like you dive so deeply into a system that it just becomes part of you,
Hmm.
and like human design, it's not that there's not more to learn, because there always is more to learn.
Oh,
But
right.
I do feel like in the way that I shared it, it feels like it just become part of me, in that communication doesn't require a whole lot of thinking. It's more just like the chart just makes sense to me.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So the title of your book is such a powerful question. How do you choose? What does choice mean to you, especially in the context of self-discovery and personal alignment?
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, we are all making decisions every single day, big and small, from like who
Mhm.
to connect with to, what job to take, to where to live, to like who to partner with, to like how to spend our Saturday,
Mhm.
And I think that we can get really in our heads around the decisions, and we can question ourselves, and then it can just like lead to a lot of wasted time and energy and saying yes to things that we don't actually have the energy for. And
Mhm.
so I think human design has so much value in so many areas, but one of those areas is around decision making. And so
Right.
the vision of the book is like, how can you use human design to help you make the best, most empowered decisions in every part of your life? And I guess I've really come to believe that when we choose in the way that feels right, things in our life really tend to flow. We say yes to
Mhm.
the right relationships, the right opportunities. We can like surrender to the experience because we know we're in the right place.
Yeah.
When we say yes out of obligation, out of a desire to please because we think we should, which happens to all of us,
Right.
that experience is often a lot harder because that doubt persists. And then we like have to eventually extricate ourselves from the experience because it was never the right one to begin with. And like
Mhm.
And we often know we just don't trust it. And so, a big part of the book is really helping people really know how to make decisions they can trust, where like they're at a crossroads and they can open the book and be like, oh, right, this is how I choose. I tell
Mhm.
one story in the book about a woman who I sat with, Lauren, who was about to get married, um, was expressing a lot of hesitation around the marriage. And it kind of became very clear in our conversation that it wasn't the right thing for her. And I
Mhm.
remember asking her, I was like, and when did you know he wasn't right? And she was like, from the minute I said yes to the relationship, and like here we are 2.5 years later of her being like, and now I finally have to trust it because I'm on the verge of like making this commitment. And so like it's just, I think there's something so powerful about taking the time to really explore how it is we make the best decisions, how it is we can trust ourselves in a way that allows us to move through life with a lot more trust and surrender because we're saying yes to the right things in the first place.
For me personally, and I think a lot of other people, like there can be a paralysis around making a decision and thinking that there's like a right and a wrong choice,
Yeah.
whether that's career, love. How does human design reframe what a right choice means?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that a right choice is not like this choice will lead to like the most successful thing. It's honestly more around like, is this like a choice that you actually have the energy for? Like, is this a choice that like on a deep level, like is the right path forward. And the thing is,
Mhm.
like, we're going to make decisions that aren't right all the time, and we'll have to kind
Yeah.
of return to them. But like, I guess it's when we are choosing from a place of like us knowing within that it's right versus a place of like, I think that I should do this. I think this might lead to me this to this place. Like from like a more kind of mental, logical, rational place, it's more connecting to kind of like a deeper knowing within us. Like, can I just use you as an example?
Yeah, of course.
Because I want to kind of make it tangible because we all have different ways
Yeah.
of choosing. Like for you,
Yeah.
you're somebody who's got like a very active mind. So I can imagine it's very easy to try to choose from that place because like you can explore all the possibilities. But like according to your
Yeah.
design, and this is not true for all of us, like you are somebody who's meant to be like a gut decision maker. It's like a feeling, a visceral feeling in your belly that either pulls you toward or pushes you away.
Hmm.
It comes in the moment. And so like while some people like me, like I'm meant to sleep on things and feel into things, like you're meant to really trust your first instinct. And what your first instinct is telling you for you specifically is whether you actually have the energy for something because you're somebody who's very has boundless energy when you're lit up, So
Yeah.
it's really around like, what do I actually feel like available for? And the timing could be like, I'm not available for it and then I am the next week. But for you, it's like instantaneous gut yes is how you access what you're meant to do. It's inevitable that you will then get into your mind soon after to then question and decide. But like, it's all about
Yeah.
kind of trusting that first instinct. So I'm curious, like in your own life, one, do you feel connected to your gut? Does it feel like it guides your decisions? And what do you notice in the decisions that you say yes to that come from your gut versus the ones that you ignore your gut?
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, part of my job outside of this newsletter is that I do a lot of brand partnerships and I work with all different kinds of companies and I have, opportunities coming to me at all times. And because I'm a generator, I trust that when I'm in flow, the opportunities are going to come to me. And I've really seen, like, once I learned that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense why my like entire career has operated the way that it has. Um, but yeah, it's like every day I have to make decisions and I can get quite like decision fatigue. But yeah, I just know there's times where an email lands in my inbox and like I'm already lit up as soon as I see the subject. And when I read it, I'm like, without a doubt in my mind, yes, I know I want to work on that. And then there are other ones where I'm like, yeah, like it's a cool opportunity. I don't really know if I want to take this on right now. And I sit on things and I've gotten myself to a point where I'm like, if I have to sit on something,
Hmm.
it's because it's just not right.
Hmm.
It's not, it's not for me to pursue this.
Hmm.
So I feel like sometimes I use that more as the deciding factor of like, because of course, sometimes in the moment you're like, okay, well, I can't think about this right now, but I'll come back to it. But if it's something that I find myself like, I don't even want to circle back to it. I don't want to get to that point where I have to make the decision. I'm like, it's because it's not the right decision.
Hmm. And again, like it's hard to trust it, but like I think that we can feel indecisive when often we actually know really clearly we're just not trusting it. You know, like I even had somebody, I was talking to somebody last week who has a similar authority to you gut in the
Mhm.
moment. And like he basically was like, yeah, I have like 105 unread text messages, all these friends that want things from me. And like, and then when we
Mhm.
talked about it, he was like, yeah, there are some that I'm like immediately lit up by and respond. And those are really
Yep.
easy. And there's like a lot that I'm just like avoiding dealing with, but like he already knows,
I
you
know.
know? And so like it is really kind of trusting that first instinct and knowing that when you start to kind of rationalize it, like maybe I should, or maybe it would lead to this thing, like you've disconnected from your gut. You know, for people to get an example of the difference, like I'm somebody that's meant to sleep on things and feel into things and really mull over things. Like when I say yes, immediately I often wake up the next day and feel differently. And so like I think
Mm.
that again, when it just allows us to kind of enter into things that we feel like are the right thing for us at that moment in time. And I really
Yeah.
do believe that we're able to surrender more fully to the experience because we know it's right. Like
Yeah.
I know that when I enter into a thing like too quickly, then I like am like full of kind of doubt and questioning throughout that experience. So I think that I'm not even able to kind of be in it as much because I didn't really choose correctly from the first place, in the first place,
It's so interesting that how many different ways are there for people
to choose.
to choose?
7. So if you look up your chart at humandesignblueprint.com, you'll see your authority. And just very briefly, there's emotional people like me that are meant to sleep on
Mhm.
things and feel into things, sacral like you that like need something to show up in your world, then you'll kind of get a gut feeling and that first instinct is the best instinct. There are splenic people, which is all about kind of trusting your intuition in the moment. It's not the gut feeling, it's more like a quiet knowing, a whisper, kind of this like intuitive feeling. It kind of arrives out of nowhere, disappears just as quickly, and it's super quiet. So it requires some like quiet and alone time to access it.
Mhm.
There are self-projected authorities, which kind of they need to talk things out and just see how it feels to say things aloud. Often their voice will like become more animated, and they're like, "There it is." Um, there are people that are ego authorities, which is all about kind of choosing based on like what they desire, what they want, what they feel like they must have. When I hear these people say like, I need this, I have to have this, I must do this, like that's so their ego speaking. And that's kind of
Okay.
just like what they want. Um, there are mental authorities, which is all about kind of talking things out as well, but often in multiple spaces with multiple people and kind of seeing what threads of truth stay over time. And
Mm.
then there are none or wait a lunar cycle, and they're meant to give themselves a full month before they choose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is not always feasible, but I what I always remind to them
Right.
is really like doing their best to kind of choose from like a very unhurried, unpressured place and
Right.
kind of because they need space and time to kind of disentangle what's not theirs from what is.
Damn. So I have to I'm the fastest decision maker. I just got
You
to
are.
go right off the cuff.
Yeah.
Wow. Does that also, so I'm like, so does that also apply to like how I would choose someone
Yeah.
romantically?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, your gut can change. Like you might be like,
Right.
yes. And then of course, like 2 weeks later, you're like no longer, but like,
Right.
or you might need more to respond to, but like I think that, yeah, it's the first instinct. Like if you're like on an app and you see somebody and you feel like an immediate pull, like reach
Yeah.
out. You know, if you're like at a coffee shop and you see someone across the room and you're just like, oh my God, I feel this undeniable pull, like go talk to them.
Right. Yeah.
Like it is this kind of like gut instinct that it's pretty inexplicable, which means that like somebody you might be drawn to might not really fit what you had in mind in terms of like demeanor or age or job or whatever, but like
Right.
it's really trusting like what feels right over what you think you should do. And
Yeah.
I do often see that people with your kind of authority can feel really indecisive when they don't
Yeah.
really know how to access their gut because their decision making is super simple. And I might have already said this, but like one of the most powerful ways to access your gut feeling is that people ask you very specific questions.
Questions.
Like if I'm to ask you, like, what do you want to do about this? You might be like, I don't know. But if I'm to ask you, like, do you want to take on this partnership? You'll be like, no. Or yes, you know, or like,
Right.
do you want to like date this person or do you want to launch this now? Like I so often sit with people that will kind of talk about the possibility of a partnership or a collaboration for like 10 minutes. And then I'm like, do you want to do it? They're like, no.
Yeah.
So like they always knew. It's just around being asked in a way that actually helped them bypass their mind and get them into their gut feeling.
Right. Yeah, I know. Because sometimes I think I struggle with like big open-ended questions. Like if someone's like, "Where do you want to go to dinner tonight?" I'm like, I don't, I don't know. That feels way too overwhelming for me. But if someone was like, "Okay, here's these three options," then like I could make a decision
Exactly.
really quickly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, I feel like yeah, dating as a generator and like using the apps and whatnot. Um, I think I've been able to really feel out how, I don't know, I just feel like there is a way that things flow when it's like the right connection. I feel
Mm,
like even if I'm not, I mean, I think in my gut, I'm always sure, but I feel like there's always just like a very easy flow. And then, like, maybe we send a few messages back and forth and then we make plans to meet. But it's almost like I know when someone just messages me, like this just happened to me like last week, and someone's just like, "Hey, how was your day?" I'm like, "No, this is not going anywhere." Like, it's just not. I'm like, that's you don't know me, and the first thing you want to ask me is how is my day going? I'm like, do you even care? You don't
mm,
care. Like, ask me something more interesting than that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and just like when the conversation is like moving so slowly, I'm just like, no, I can't. There's just like a very specific flow that I've had with men that I've actually like gone on to date.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like trying to notice,
I
you
love
know,
it.
these patterns that sort of happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, why force things when it's just not there?
Yeah, and I just feel like that's so the theme is like I feel like human design reminds us of like what is the way of operating that feels like very natural, that like just like and feels like it leads us like into the right things versus like what is the way of being that like we think we should do but actually like doesn't really feel right and doesn't really get us into the right things in the first place. So like
Right.
there's just something about being like I'm just gonna trust my instinct here that like either like as a generator, like a conversation is giving you energy and you find yourself leaning in, or
Yeah.
a conversation is depleting you and you find yourself leaning back.
Yeah.
You know, it just feels like you don't need to like convince yourself out of that. Like
Right.
that's like a pretty binary thing.
Yeah. And it actually just made me think about, um, how often people, how often like we just give advice to other people.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously there's like a certain level of projection that's like always present in advice, but um, yeah, it's like the way that I'm going to advise you is not necessarily going to work with your energy type.
That's right. It is so wild. You know, I have so many coaches in my certification program because I feel like so many coaches are like, oh, I like need to understand how to like tailor my support to each person. And even I
Hmm.
was on a podcast recently where somebody had this similar authority to you, and she was like, wow, like I have been basically encouraging all my clients to kind of trust their gut instinct in the moment because that worked for me. And like, you know, again, like I love it
Right.
because she's encouraging people to trust her intuition, but like
Yeah.
she was like, it now makes sense to me why some clients like had a really hard time integrating that because like they just didn't know so quickly. I think
Hmm.
like it is so powerful to be just be reminded that like everybody is so different. And I also sit with so many clients that like have taken coaching programs or business programs or whatever, like based on what has worked for somebody else. And they feel really disappointed when that same strategy doesn't work for them. And like they're like, oh, I'm incompetent. It's like, no, it's not about that. Like you're just wired differently. And I think
Hmm.
human design is the most powerful tool I found in the context of business, work, parenting, relationships to help us like have a very specific language and framework to really understand how uniquely we're each wired.
Yeah. I also on social, like I'll speak a lot about manifesting, and I get a lot of questions about like, what's the best way to manifest? And actually, the number one thing I always tell people is like, find out your human design because it's such an important aspect to
Totally.
how we put energy out in the world to like get the things that we want. Because I'm like, for me, manifesting feels actually like really easy because I just know that when I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing and I'm in this space where I feel like I'm in alignment, then the things that I want quite easily come to me.
Totally. Exactly.
But that's might not be the case for other people. And there's so many different ways to manifest. So I'm always like, you need to learn your human design so you can get a feel for for what is right for you. Because like how does a projector best manifest if you need to be invited?
Well, I think like the two things that come up are one, as projectors, like we're here to be invited in, but people cannot invite you unless they see you. And
Mm-hmm.
so our job is not to like pitch individuals, but more to kind of make ourselves visible and show ourselves really authentically and see who resonates with us and comes to us, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so, um, it honestly even makes me think about like doing the influencer campaign for my book.
Mm-hmm.
Like first I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like reach out to large followings of like friends of mine. And instead what I did is I actually just went through all my followers who had, significant followings and reached out to them. So these are people that have like already opted into human design, already have chosen to follow me, are already
Right.
interested. And I was like, do you want a thing that you already are interested in? And they're like, 100% yes. So like
Right.
it felt like way more natural for me to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding the sharing as a result is obviously so fun because people are like, I want this. But like the point being that like one, we have to like let people know that we exist
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that feels really authentic. And I think the other piece that comes up is that like as much as we're here to be recognized and seen as a projector, like it's so much easier for others to recognize us when we recognize ourselves.
Mm.
Like as
Yeah.
projectors, if we're still like feel like our worth is really like all about how hard we work and how much we do, like it's hard for others to really see our value. So like the more that we can disentangle our worth from like how hard we're working, how much we're doing, and we see how much we bring to the table around our perspective and how we see, the easier we make it for others to see it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Obviously we've been talking about how you make decisions and cultivating that like inner guidance. What helped you deepen that trust in yourself over time?
I'm always learning. Yeah, I definitely like don't have this figured out. I think human design is such an amazing reminder for me because it just like keeps bringing me back to myself. I think that would help deepen my trust was like just life experience
Mhm.
where like I would just like choose something in the moment based on like I don't know what I thought I should want or what I thought might happen. And it was often like kind of a lot of adrenaline and a lot of nervous energy. And then I would wake up the next
Mhm.
day and be like, I don't want to do that. And then I would have to like extricate myself out of it. And it just felt really complicated. So I think looking back at my life, I think that like the experiences I've rushed into have been filled with a lot of like nervousness and intensity and also ultimately a lot of regret.
Mm.
And the ones that I've like been slow with, even though it's been annoying, are the ones that just like are filled with like a lot of peace and surrender and clarity. And so like I think what is helping me trust myself over time is just like looking at what happens when I trust it and when I don't. And honestly more than like what happens with the decision itself, which is meaningful in its own thing, but also more around like how did it affect like how I could engage in the experience? Like what did it actually feel like? Um, so I think that that is one piece. And I also think that like human design has been such a cool tool for me in helping me trust others
Mhm.
way of choosing. Like I tell this story in the book, my partner is like you, he's a sacral authority, and it's been really annoying at times because there are moments where I like really want a gut response for him and like he's got nothing for me. Like I
Mhm.
tell a story of us looking for an Airbnb to go, one winter, and I like showed him 1,000 places that were like so beautiful. And like he was just like, no, no, no. And I was just like, oh, this is so annoying. Like I just like, this is perfect. Look at this one. Look at the windows here. And then one day we were in a cab to a friend's house and I pulled up this Airbnb that had no reviews. And I showed it to him and he's like, 100% yes, book it right now. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I booked it and like it was like the most magical place ever. And so like I think it's also
Mm.
allowed me to trust his knowing more,
Right.
because like as annoying as it is, he's so often right. So
Yeah.
I think that it's just through experimenting and practicing with these things that I think I've learned to trust it for myself and for others too.
How does one differentiate between fear and like intuition when making a big choice?
I feel like fear often comes with a reason.
Mm.
Like as in like if I do this, this might happen. Or
Right.
like versus like and again, everybody's yes is going to be different.
Different. Right.
But like I think that like for you, yes just feels like so expansive. It feels like so energized. It feels like you can't help but move towards the thing.
Hmm.
Whereas a yes for me feels like so calm and settled and just like it's already become part of me and I just would be like, why would I even deny it? So
Hmm.
I feel like getting to know our yes, and I talk a lot in the book around how people describe the yes, like who actually have that, because I think that's really important. Like I
Hmm.
think that's probably the piece. And we also have like really specific fears in our design. Like I don't know whether any of these resonate with you, but like the fears that are most relevant in your design are one, like a fear of like not finding your purpose or something worth fighting for, a fear that
Totally.
like past baggage will catch up with you, that you'll kind of repeat past mistakes, a fear of taking on too
Hmm.
much responsibility. So like I don't know whether those fears show up at all, and yet like I find it's kind of disempowering in a really productive way to name them because it kind of disempowers them and it's like Oh,
Right.
those fears that are there and like they're never meant to guide me. I'm curious, do any of those resonate with you?
Yeah, like all of those definitely resonate, like absolutely, like not living out my purpose. I feel like that was a big fear that was coming up when I was wanting to leave my old job. Um, and just feeling like it's so funny how it's like you have no real like blueprint for your future because I knew I have been in corporate for so long and I was going to just go work for myself. But it's like there's just this knowing that like, no, I'm meant to be doing more than what I'm doing right now. And I can't explain it, but this
Yeah,
feeling is like eating away at me. And even I think since being on my own and working for myself, there's still um, there's just still this desire of like, I am meant to have this like purpose-filled life and I want to make an impact and how are the ways that I can do that? And it's very, very important to me. Um, I love talking about, yeah, fulfilling your purpose. And I don't think everybody's job is their purpose, but I
totally.
know that for me, mine very much is connected to my purpose.
Mm-hmm. So like I think it's so useful to know what those fears are because like they're going to be present and yet they aren't meant to guide
Mhm.
us. And so like there's something around being like you know it's funny and there's wisdom on the other side of each fear. Like for you, yeah, there's not a fear of like not finding your purpose in something worth fighting for, but like the wisdom of your design is like you're here to like know what's worth a fight.
Mhm.
You know, because like there is a fighting energy in a really positive way where it's like I want to stand up
Yeah,
for things I care about. Like I want to kind of be really
absolutely.
strong in that way. Like I need to feel fueled and yet like I've got to really use my intuition and trust my gut to be like what are the things that are worth the fight? And you know, a fear of like past baggage catching up with you and like repeating past mistakes, like your wisdom
Mhm.
is like understanding what those mistakes are so you and others don't have to repeat them. You know,
Yes.
so like there's just I think that like it's also been really powerful for me to remember with my own fears of like on the other side of that are such gifts as long as we don't get consumed by the fears. So I think that like to your original question, I think really understanding your yes helps you differentiate between
Mhm.
the two. And I think also understanding your specific fears also helps you recognize them as they arise and
Mhm.
move through them and not get kind of stuck in them.
Yeah. I definitely feel like the repeating like past mistakes is such a prevalent thing for me um and a kind of a ongoing theme in my newsletter when I write personal essays about my life because I it's so important for me to like learn the lessons and find the ways to integrate them because I think we can have awareness around a pattern or something that's keeping us stuck but being able to integrate those lessons and then being able to make decisions from that place are two very different things that I've
Totally.
really struggled with over the last like decade or so. So, um, yeah, and I don't know, there's always like this feeling in me of knowing that like, yeah, I need to do better. And that I
Yeah.
know because I know better, I need to do better.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Um, If a reader could walk away with just one new belief or practice from How Do You Choose, what would you want it to be?
Hmm. I think it would just be clarity around how they're wired to do things in a way that feels like it gives them permission.
Mm,
Like, I just feel like it would be like one permission slip of like, even I was just doing a live with somebody before this who was like, she, like you, is meant to let things come to her and just kind of see what sparks her gut and like follow that. And she was like, I just like keep trying to force it. She's like, I could just keep chasing and it's just like I like lose all my energy and like there's something so relieving about knowing it's meant to come to me. So like I don't know what it will be for each person because there are a bajillion permission slips in this book, but I think that it
right.
hopefully gives you the permission to approach one area of your life that's been feeling challenging in a way that just feels better.
I just really think human design is so fascinating. And as you said, like what it gives us permission to do and like how we move about our lives. Because I also think, especially like in a corporate setting, and I'm sure you've come across this because you've worked with so many companies, is like it feels like there's only one way to work, especially when you work in a corporation, and not everybody likes to work the same. And not everyone like yeah, people are just like wired so differently. I feel like it really gives people permission to lean into, oh, what is actually going to help me be most productive instead of like forcing something that's like actually maybe just like draining my energy or is not
Totally.
allowing me to like flourish in the way that I should be.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that we just often make ourselves wrong for the things that make us us. Maybe you're a generator who's like, I got to handle everything because I'm so capable. And like you kind of put your own passions to the side when like you prioritizing that gives you more energy to do everything else. Or perhaps you're a manifesting generator who kind of interprets your need for many things as like being scattered or flaky when like it's just a sign of like your need for variety. Or maybe you're a projector who like perceives your need for rest as lazy when it's like the thing that gives you the most energy and the most like it just we just so often make ourselves wrong for the things that we actually need,
Mm,
and human design is such a permission slip there.
totally. What's something you're still learning to choose for yourself?
I think that so much of my design is around needing rest and space and time alone. And I feel like I've just had like such full seasons back to back to back with like the book and business and two young kids. And so like I think that I'm just still choosing and learning with my design how to find time for myself, even amidst the crazy. Like to
Mm-hmm.
not feel like it's like, okay, only when all these things die down can I like actually take a beat. It's
Mm-hmm.
like how in the midst of the crazy
Can
can I
you weave
still take a
in?
moment for myself? Yeah.
Yeah, I can
So,
imagine. Very crazy.
yeah.
Last question. What's bringing you joy right now?
Oh my God, my kids. I've got a 7-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, and they're just, it's funny. I like followed up a week of crazy launch with like a solo week with my kids because my husband was traveling and it was my first time alone with the two of them. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh my gosh. And like I have to say it was like so much fun, especially following all the book stuff. So I think that like I think I probably wouldn't feel that way if it was all the time. But I would say that like they just really like they're both at phases that it's just, it feels really fun. I'm having a lot of fun with them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Erin. Thank you for all your
Yeah.
wisdom. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited to continue reading this book.
Yay. I'm so happy that we were able to connect. Thank you so much for having me.